Today, while studying under Stephen Furtick, I was watching videos, and during his preaching, I received a couple of revelations that I want to share with you. So, the first of them is that the crucifixion is remembered as Jesus is defeating the enemy, and he conquered death and he conquered sin by going to the cross and giving himself for us. But there's also a message in the resurrection. And so today, when I heard Stephen Furtick talking about Joshua, I remembered that there were 12 stones taken up, that God instructed them to take 12 stones from the River Jordan when Joshua passed over. And the story behind this is that the Israelites had wandered for 40 years during Moses' time, but during that time they didn't think that they could go in and conquer Jericho and move into the promised land. So they lived in fear and doubt basically for 40 years during the wandering in the desert. And then Joshua became their leader after Moses, and Joshua was one of the two spies that came back saying that they thought they could conquer them, but the majority voted not to go. So later, when he was the leader, he did go. So he followed God's instructions to go over into the promised land, and his generation got to see the promised land because of his faith, because of him believing that even though the other people were bigger and that they had bigger armies and that it was a big city, if you recall, the story was that Joshua led them to march around the city until the walls fell down. So even though they couldn't infiltrate those walls, God gave them specific instructions to march around the walls 7 days, and on the seventh day they were to shout, and the walls fell. So just his faith in knowing that he could believe what God said got them over into the promised land. So the point of me telling you this is that I remembered when this happened, he actually parted the River Jordan just like he did the Red Sea, and he allowed them to walk over on dry land. So at that time, he told them to take 12 stones where the 12 priests stood and take them from the middle of the River Jordan over into the promised land, and these were called their Ebenezers. An Ebenezer is a memory stone. So these were stones that God said to take over into the promised land and to put there so that when the children asked what happened, they would remember. Because after being in the promised land for some time, like we all do, sometimes we forget how we got there. We forgot that God brought us out of a place of wandering and doubt, and that he provided that promised land for us. So these were the memory stones that were supposed to remind us. And in thinking about that, I thought about how the cross is the symbol that we think of for Jesus, because we remember what he did for us. And I thought about how wonderful it would be if we used the stone that rolled away from the tomb as the symbol of the resurrection. And so I want that to be my memory stone. I want the stone that I carry to be the stone that represents the resurrection of Christ. And so instead of wearing the cross, I want to wear the stone as a memory stone, as an Ebenezer of the resurrection, because that is where the victory is. So Jesus conquered sin and death on the cross and rose victoriously on the third day, and our memory of that is the stone that rolled away from the tomb. And another way that we can remember what Jesus did for us on the cross, at the Last Supper, Jesus said that we were to break the bread and drink the wine and remember that his body was broken and his blood was shed for us. And it's my personal belief that he did this because every day we have to eat and drink. There's not a day that goes by that we don't think about food or we think about drink. So this was his way of telling us we could remember on a daily basis what he did for us. And so every time we eat, if you say the blessing before you eat, that's one way of recognizing that you're remembering him. But it's my personal belief that instead of having one ceremony every now and then with the bread and the juice, it's every day that we're supposed to remember. And I think that's why God used the bread and the drink, because that is an everyday need for us. And it also reminds us that we can't live by just bread alone, because we live, the Bible says, by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. So it reminds us also to be in the Word, to read our Bible. So every time you put something in your mouth and every time you drink something, just remember what Jesus did for you on the cross. Remember that you can live in victory. Keep a stone with you, a memory stone, and remember that you can live in victory the way that Jesus came out victorious out of that tomb and rose again because he is the living God. And remember these things each day so that you can live out of that victory, so that you know that Jesus has already conquered whatever you're trying to defeat. And if you remain in him, that you live each day in victory. Have a blessed day. Be happy, be healthy, be blessed.